Hello and welcome to the channel. My name's Saga and I'm currently working as a software engineer in London, and I graduated from the University of Sheffield in 2021. So I've not been in London for that long, and in this video I'm going to explain, some of the pros and cons of moving to London as a graduate. But before I properly get into this video, I do want to stress that it is going to be very tech and software engineering sort of orientated. So just bear that in mind. And if you are someone who is not going to go into the tech or software engineering sort of sector, then there may be some important points, but yeah, I just wanted to clarify that that's the sort of angle I'm going to approach this video in. So let's start off with some of the pros. Why is London such an incredible place to be when you are a graduate? Well, one of the main reasons why I chose to move to London is purely because of the network opportunities you have within the city. Since I moved to London, I've been to quite a few different sort of networking events. So one of the most recent ones I've been to was the Silicon Milk Roundabout event, which is basically where a ton of companies basically try and convince you to work for them as a software engineer. And before that, I went to a sort of like open day sort of thing. It was like a leadership event at Palantir, which is a massive, big money and very exciting tech company. So there's a whole range of events that you can go to. Another event that I went to was a serverless computing networking event. And this was basically all to do with serverless architecture in the cloud. Because London is the base for many of these tech companies within the UK, it has a lot of opportunities to offer you in terms of being able to network with people working at these companies. And so if you have ambitions to really grow your career, I'd say London has an amazing potential to enable you to meet these other types of people. The reason why I'm super into these networking events in London is that I just never had the opportunity to do this sort of thing when I was younger, because I grew up in a relatively small town, or city should I say, called Stoke-on-Trent. And the main thing that Stoke-on-Trent was known for is potteries. So, your cups and plates manufacturing. And well, that is something that I didn't really want to go into. The next reason why moving to London was a great decision for me is the fact that there is always something to do, even if you're bored or whatever. So in London, well, you're basically in one of the best cities in the world. Actually, I Googled this just before filming this video, and apparently it is the second or third most visited, not countries, but cities in the whole world. So the fact that I get to live in most people's dream holiday destination is literally insane. I like to go cycling in my spare time, and I think it's incredible that because I live in London, I can go cycling from my flat and basically ride past Downing Street, Buckingham Palace, Big Ben, and even go to places like the London Eye, just, on one single ride. And most people never get to see that in their whole lifetime, which I think is insane. And since London is home to quite a number of the UK's largest museums, there's always something to go and see if you're interested. Maybe one day you could be like, you know what? Let me go and see the British Museum, or let me go and have a look at the Science Museum today. So I think if you are living in London, there's always something to do. You're never going to get bored, and well, there's always something new as well in London, because a lot of these museums change their exhibitions and so on. So definitely it is worth living in London if you just don't want to sit around at home. Well, London is home to 9 million people, and of course 9 million people do need entertaining. So there is plenty of different types of activities that you can do in London with your friends, such as going to play mini golf, going to a driving range, going to play shuffleboard, which is like this little game where you throw these pucks and whatever. And there's other things like VR arcades and stuff like that. So there's literally anything you can imagine, London probably has it. So there is a countless number of activities that you can do with your friends. And well, because I don't drink alcohol, there is plenty of things you can do that don't involve just drinking, which I think is super, super exciting. The last reason why I think it's super cool to live in London is the fact that there are so many events that only happen in London. And because I'm living in London, I basically have more of a push factor to go to these sort of events. And some of those include things like the Amazon Web Services Summit. So I went to that and that was really exciting. I got to learn a lot about their sort of technology and what kind of things you can build with Amazon Web Services. And other things include Ride London, which was a cycling event that I partook in, which was only just, when was it? It's like 2 days ago since I'm filming this video. And another event that I am planning to go to is the Formula E E-Prix, which is basically the electric version of Formula One. And that is hosted on the streets in London. So there are many events that only happen in London. So I think being in London gives you the opportunity to try new things that happen only in the city. I'm someone who really enjoys doing new things and really hates doing, repetitive things, doing the same thing every day. So I think the fact of living in London gives you the opportunity to get involved with different new activities, especially since, like I've said before, I didn't grow up in London. So a lot of the things London has to offer is brand new to me. So I really enjoy living in London and I've enjoyed the past few months of being here. And basically that summarizes all the pros of living in London. So why might you not want to move to London after finishing university? One of the things I really dislike about living in London is the cost of rent. Well, I think it makes sense why it's so expensive because, well, I listed out all the pros of living in London, so it kind of makes sense why the rent is so high because a lot of people want to live here. I personally would say that if you are to have a graduate salary, which is around £30,000 per year or above, then you would be doing okay living in London. You may have to flat share if you are around the 30 to £35,000 a year mark. But I think as your career progresses, your salary is going to go up and up. So obviously then you're able to afford your own place and so on. You probably won't be able to buy a house or a flat immediately. It probably will take you a good, few years to get there, but still you will be able to live in your own flat and so on, especially when your salary is getting to about like 40 to 50,000 pounds a year. So let's try and answer this question. Is it actually worth living in London? Because I have listed a lot of the pros of living in London and I've also listed why it's not so great to live in London. So I guess the question is the increased cost of rent really worth all the pros that you get from living in London? Well, I personally think it is, as long as you capitalize on the pros. Because in theory, you could come to London and, pay a lot on rent, but then, you do all the fun stuff in London, but you don't really capitalize on the sheer networking opportunities you have in the city. And yes, you can obviously network whilst you socialize, which is obviously a good thing. I mean, I do that myself. But in terms of actually actively pursuing some opportunities and going to like these career-oriented events and so on. So if you are that type of person, then I would say moving to London would be greatly beneficial for your career because you're going to learn so much in such a short amount of time than if you were to live in a smaller city within the UK. And in some respects, the way I look at living in London as a graduate is that you do pay a premium to live in London, but I do see it as an investment into my future and my future career. And especially if I do capitalize on these opportunities that London has to offer, I do think that the investment will pay off in the future. I don't know for certain, but there is a greater and greater chance if I do make the active steps to, make the most of living in this city. So ultimately, if your graduate starting salary is around £30,000 or above, and also you're a career-driven individual who wants to capitalize on all the opportunities London has, then I would definitely recommend moving to London. But if not, then I think moving to London might not be a financially wise decision for yourself. So I would say perhaps moving to another city like Manchester or Birmingham, where the rent prices are much lower, but the opportunities are also, lower as well, might be a better option for you. Or perhaps even just living at home and working remotely might be another option too. But there we go. That's my sort of like analysis of whether you should move to London or not, and also my perspective of how I found living in London for the past few months since I moved here. If you enjoy this video, consider subscribing to the channel. Also like this video and comment on this video whether or not you would choose to move to London. And if you want to explore London with me, then I do have a video where I walked pretty much from east to west side of London, and basically check that video out. There's some cool stuff that I saw along the way, which you will think is pretty surprising. So check it out, and I will see you guys in another video. See ya.